But it's in Swedish, so I'm not going to waste your time promoting that. But this film, though, I co-produced a few years ago. It's called Press, Pause, Play. And it's a documentary about how the digital technology has changed the creative landscape. So basically, you could say the main question of the film is all those digital tools we have nowadays, when it's really easy to create your own stuff and it's easy to distribute stuff and so on, has that led to like a creative explosion and or a new golden age of creativity, or is it more that we're flooded in lots of amateur crap? That's the question of the film, and it's actually nowadays it's available for free online on both YouTube and Vimeo. So if you go and watch that, I'll be really happy. I'm going to talk for maybe 25 minutes or something, and there will be time for questions afterwards. And just to say that, emphasize that I'm a journalist, not like a music industry insider. So I'm going to focus more on trying to tell a story and more give the bigger picture rather than like showing lots of numbers and explaining complicated business strategies and so on. So just a warning. So I guess you all know these two logos. The Pirate Bay is a service that I think by a lot of people has been seen as the biggest enemy of the music industry in the last 10 years. And in other circles, well, the music industry is seen as villains. They've been celebrated as heroes. This other service, Spotify, is by a lot of those people who think these guys are the big bad guys, the biggest enemy, think these guys, or say that these guys are the saviors of the record industry, and together with Deezer and RDO and Xbox Music and others are being pioneers in what I would say is the most successful new way of creating revenue from recorded music. So both these two originated in the same little country. And why is that? And are they really each other's opposites, as they're often described? I will argue that they actually have a lot in common. So to start out, what do people know about Sweden in general? I mean, it's a small country, we're 9 million people. It's quite cold up there, you know. I sometimes meet people thinking that like we almost have polar bears walking the streets in the winter and so on. Also, we have the midsummer celebration where we get drunk and dance around the phallus symbol every summer. I think that's the three key things you need to know about Sweden. But I also wanted to mention that Swedish people have generally been fast at adapting to new ideas and technologies. Everything from like gay marriage to mobile phones. I'm not sure if this is because we're open-minded or just like insecure, but there was even a documentary made on Sweden a couple of years ago saying that it was titled "The Most Modern Country in the World." I'm not sure about that, but I think that's a good background for this next slide. This guy is Carl Bildt. He was the Prime Minister of Sweden from 1991 to 1994. And this was a time when Sweden was in a recession and the unemployment rates were high and nothing was going really well, actually. But at the same time, home computers were growing more and more popular. And Carl Bildt decided that IT would be what would save the Swedish economy, that he had this vision that Sweden would be at the forefront of this brave new digital world and so on. So you could say that he was like the Al Gore of Sweden or something like that. And he actually made a big deal of the fact that he had the first email exchange with another head of state, with Mr. Bill Clinton in America. So in 1994, Carl Bildt sent an email to Bill Clinton saying like, "Hi Bill, just trying this stuff out." And Bill Clinton is supposed to have answered something like, "Dear Carl, this technology is really the future," something like that. And this was a big PR success for Carl Bildt, but it showed like 10 years later or something that this Bill Clinton email was actually written by someone in his staff and not by Bill Clinton himself. But anyway, Carl Bildt's ideas planted the seed in Swedish politics and led to lots of reforms and projects that was trying to create this like new IT country, Sweden. So, for example, the government subsidized construction of broadband networks, and also everyone working in the public sector, which is quite a few people in Sweden, were offered to buy home computers for a really low price and without tax. So in just a few years, I think 1.7 million computers were sold to Swedish people that way. So sometime in the late 90s, Sweden turned out to be like one of the most wired countries in the world. And I think still today the average broadband in Sweden is up to 5 times faster than the ones in the US. So the result was really an entire generation of Swedish kids growing up with like having computers, access to computers, and playing with wired computers. This guy was one of those kids. He's called Peter Sunde, and when he was 9 years old, he got a computer. And his family, they moved a lot. I think they moved almost like 1 time a year to a new place. So for him, the computer and the world within the computers really became his own home. So he always spent his time at the BBS, if you know what that's like, a kind of a predecessor to the internet, if you simplify it. And also in IRC chat rooms, talking to other like computer geeks and hackers and discussing computers. And he started coming into the copy party scene or something like that. He was part of a group that cracked the copy protections on video games. And when it was just in his teens, and when he flunked out of high school and started working, his first job actually handling the computers in that high school that he just went to earlier. And a few years later, he started working with like creating websites for companies, etc. So Peter Sunde and his friends on the IRC channels, they were like a generation who had grown up with computers, who thought like copying files was an obvious part of how the internet worked, and they had learned everything they knew about computers they were self-taught and was learning by doing and so on. And they thought like free exchange of information and data files, even if it's music or video, was crucial for how the internet worked. And when Peter here was around 25 years old, he and some of his friends from an IRC channel, they took that idea and they took it to the public. So in 2003, Piratbyrån was presented, or something like that. It was, you could say it's a kind of think tank, or was a kind of think tank, but consisting just of young hackers who met online. And the Piratbyrån had an approach that was quite new in Swedish debate at the time. They said like, well, internet piracy is great, and copyright, that's just a thing of the past, and everyone should download whatever they want. So these guys were really like nobodies. They weren't famous or anything, but that idea was so new and so unusual, so that made them like, they were invited to TV shows and radio shows and big debates and everything. So this is a couple of years after Napster arrived. So the whole market of recorded music had been turned upside down, and the record industry had gone from really a golden age to like a complete crisis. And I think maybe some of you guys know this better than me, but I think there was a feeling in the record industry that the digital technology really must be something good that you can take advantage of, but no one knew really how, and all they saw was like other people trying to ruin their business. So when new filing sharing services turned up after Napster, they got legal threats from record companies and they closed down. So Piratbyrån thought, yeah, maybe we should create our own file sharing service. And hence we got the Pirate Bay. The Pirate Bay, if there's anyone who doesn't know, it's a BitTorrent tracker, which is basically like a service that connects users and allows them to download stuff from each other. So to Piratbyrån, this wasn't really meant to be like a huge phenomenon or a business idea or anything. It was more like a way for them to back up their ideas and show people it's easy to download film and music and so on. So in the beginning, the Pirate Bay was run from a small computer just in the basement of one of the guys' workplaces. But after a while, it started growing, and it became huge. As I said, the thing was with other file sharing services was that they got threats, legal threats, and when they got them, they closed down. But the Pirate Bay didn't do that. They even had like this pirate ship as their logo to show that they were pro-piracy. And when they got like letters saying like you have to take down this file or this torrent, they just answered with the stuff like, this is an actual quote, "Go sodomize yourself with retractable batons." Yeah. So after a while, the Pirate Bay became the biggest BitTorrent tracker in the world. And they thought, the guys between Peter Sund and the other guys, they thought like, this is safe, this is legal, because we don't upload any material ourselves. We're just helping other people load stuff from each other. So they were convinced that what they did wasn't illegal. And at least in the beginning, it seemed that the Swedish justice system agreed, because nothing happened to the Pirate Bay. So what did this do to the image of Sweden within the music industry? I think before this was like what people in the music industry thought of Sweden. Sweden was known for producing successful pop music. And in the 90s, bands like the Wannadies and the Cardigans and Ace of Base were like famous and had hits all over the world. And according to Swedish record industry numbers, Sweden was actually at one point the third biggest music exporting country in the world. But now this image was replaced by a more disturbing one. This guy is called Per Sundin. By the way, I'm sorry, there's just guys, it's a lot of men in this story, just only men. For some reason, the story of digital music, at least in Sweden, is just like men, and no women. But Per Sundin was the head of the record company Sony BMG in Sweden. And when he traveled around to music industry conferences, a little bit like this one here, he felt like he was seen as the black sheep. People said to him like, they were annoyed and they were disappointed, and they say like, why can't you stop those guys, and they're ruining everything and so on. And there was a lot of like articles written about Sweden being like piracy heaven and so on. And for the record companies in Sweden, sales figures were disastrous. From 1999 to 2006, the record sales halved. And Per Sundin, he had to fire close to 200 people in just a few years, which is quite a lot for a small country like Sweden. As you guys probably know, there was really like no clear evidence supporting that the file sharing really caused the crisis in the record industry. But to guys at the record labels, it seemed really obvious that it was the Pirate Bay and other file sharing services just really ruining the whole record industry. And Per Sundin, he became one of the site's biggest opponents. He was a lot in the media in Sweden and saying like the Pirate Bay has to be stopped, and they're the biggest bad guy, so to speak. But eventually, Swedish people did raid the Pirate Bay and claimed that they did actually violate copyright law. And there was a trial, as you see here, and 4 people, among them Peter Sund, was found guilty to accessory to copyright infringement. Today, a few years later, the Pirate Bay still operates, and it's actually bigger than ever. Just a few weeks ago, it was the 10th birthday party, a big party in Stockholm. And it's still one of the world's 100 most visited websites. But if you go to this guy then, Peter Sund, he claims he hasn't been involved in the Pirate Bay for several years. And nowadays he's more of a kind of web entrepreneur kind of guy. He founded a company that some of you might know that's called Flutter. And it works a bit like, you know, the like button on Facebook, but it's connected to money, to a financial account. So by clicking the Flatter button, you can donate money to people that create content online, for example, bloggers or podcasters or bands, etc. So this former pirate is really now working to help artists make a living. But even so, he is now facing fines of 5 million euros and a jail sentence of 8 months. So he will have to pay quite dearly for his time with the Pirate Bay. Now I'm gonna switch to a bit of another story. This guy is called Daniel Ek. And just like Peter Sunde, Daniel Ek grew up with playing with computers. He got his first computer when he was 5 years old. And just like Peter Sunde, he spent all his times in his teens with like hacking and chatting with people on IRC channels. And his first job was not at his high school, taking care of the computers there, but it was at the community youth center where he took care of the computers. And just like Peter Sunde, he started making money by creating websites in his teens. And just like Peter Sunde, he became a web entrepreneur. But maybe a little bit less provocative. Daniel Ek founded a successful IT company sometime in his 20s. Then he sold it and made quite a buck, actually. Then he wanted to start a new company, and he and a partner started looking, maybe we can do something with the music industry. And the result was, as you probably have understood by now, Spotify. So what Daniel Ek and his partner did, they looked at the success of the Pirate Bay, and they thought, we want to create something equally successful, but within the boundaries of the law. And they came up with the idea that we must be a music streaming service. And to build this, they needed some help. So here comes this guy, Ludwig Strigeus. He was, I think you're going to start recognizing this story by now, but he grew up just playing with computers all the time, and he was a bit of a whiz kid in programming. He had the nickname the King of Code. And he hung out at the IRC channels, etc. And in his teens, he started like making his own and releasing his own computer games. When Ludwig Strigeus was 24 years old, he built his own software, which was called uTorrent. And uTorrent is a BitTorrent software, a peer-to-peer software that you use when downloading from a service like the Pirate Bay. And uTorrent turned out to be great. It became one of the most popular softwares like this in the world. So basically, you could say that this is was like the other leg of the Pirate Bay equation, or the fuel that made Pirate Bay run, or something like that. What happened was that Daniel Ek and his colleague, they bought uTorrent, and they made Ludwig Strigeus a partner of Spotify, and he asked them to. They asked him to create their software for them. So Ludwig Strigeus took the same peer-to-peer technology they had used in uTorrent, and he used that to create Spotify software, which has played an important part of making Spotify as successful as it is. And I just want to name also that Spotify is not the only example in Sweden of startups creating new business models for music. For example, here in Berlin, the Swedish company SoundCloud is based. Some of you might know. So, what is my point by telling these two stories after each other? Well, I think that guys like Peter Sunde here, they have been called the biggest enemy and the big bad wolf by the music industry and so on. And he's now facing jail time. And guys like Daniel Ek and Ludwig Strigeus, they have been named the saviors, and they have been making millions. Even though these two guys, their stories are very similar. Not only are they products of the same IT-friendly and music-friendly environment in Sweden, also their experiences in life are extremely alike. They started out involved in services used for illegal downloading, and then eventually, but one of them earlier than the other, but switched to working with legal services. Or actually, you could discuss if uTorrent would maybe not be called an illegal service, but a service used for illegal downloads at least. And also the idea of Spotify came out of the Pirate Bay. It was inspired by that. It was built on the same technology. It was developed by the same guy who has developed the most popular file sharing software, and the software that the owners of Spotify did buy and own at the same time they developed Spotify. So it's more or less the same technology, and the same people that were once ruining the music industry are now saving it. Also, I can just mention that before Spotify made a deal with the record companies, they had to have some music in their software, but they didn't have any music. They didn't have licensed music, so they put pirated music in there. So when Spotify was in beta mode, that's when I started using it myself. It was actually filled with non-licensed music. I actually found a track by a band I used to play with when I was a kid that for some weird reason had ended up in the early version of Spotify. So even Spotify started out with streaming music that they didn't really have the right to stream. And I'm just going to name a few more examples of the close ties between legal services and illegal services. This guy is not Swedish, but he is going to get just a minute of the presentation anyway. Some of you might know him. He's named Sean Parker, and he was one of the founders of Napster, the software that started the whole war between pirates and the music industry. And when he was in his teen, he actually communicated with Daniel Ek of Spotify through IRC. They were in the same circles of hacker people. And today, Sean Parker is a major investor in Spotify, and he serves on the company's board. So he's really went the whole way from being a bad guy to a good guy in the music industry. And this guy, he is Swedish. He's called Niklas Zennström. And in the year 2000, he and a friend created Kazaa, the world's then, or for a while, most popular file-sharing service in the era after Napster had closed down. But what Kazaa did was, instead of annoying the record industry and calling them names like the Pirate Bay guy did, when they were threatened with legal action, they sold their company to some people in the taxpayers' haven. And they took the money and the technology, and they created the company Skype. And today Niklas Zennström is seen as Sweden's most successful IT entrepreneur. And a couple of weeks ago, he actually received a medal from the king. So that's quite far from serving jail time as Peter Sunde. So where is the Swedish record industry today? Well, since Spotify came out in Sweden 5 years ago, the music industry, the record industry, has actually gotten back on its feet. And since 2009, music sales has been constantly up, and it's been up quite a lot. So if you see the first half of this year, music sales were up 12% compared to the same period the year before that. And I think in total, sales are something like the same numbers as in 2003, 2004, something like that. And what's interesting is that digital accounts for 75% of all the music sales. And of the digital revenue, Spotify and other streaming services account for 94%, which this shows that compared to, for example, here in Germany, where downloads are the dominant part of this equation. In Sweden, it's download accounts for just 6% of the digital revenue. So this brings us back to this guy, Per Sundin. Nowadays, he actually travels around and tells, a bit like I'm doing right now, the story of Sweden's struggle with the digital music. And he talks to other industries and the record industries in other countries, and he talks about what they can learn from what's happened in Sweden. And I think at least when I saw him talk, the title was something like you have to learn how to love when things change, or something like that. So Per Sundin says that he's never experienced a time this fun and this positive in the record industry. And he says, what's changed everything is Spotify. So nowadays, the record companies in Sweden are making more, or not more money, but they're making more money in a more long-term way. So not just when they have a new release and they make money and then it goes away. You make a little bit of money all the time. And he says, like, he and his colleague has made a lot of mistakes trying to stop the digitalization of music, and he urges his audience to, like, don't make the same mistakes, don't try to stop this digital technology. And to finish up, I want to quote what he also always says in these talks. He says that without the Pirate Bay, we would never be where we are today. And actually, there wouldn't be a Spotify if it weren't for the Pirate Bay. Thanks.
Thanks, Adam. We have a lot of time left, so if there's any questions from the audience, please feel free to ask Adam. Yeah.
All right, hello. Thank you for your nice presentation. I have a few questions.
Sure.
The Swedish market has started to grow again, right? There's other people that would interpret the numbers a little bit different, because they would say, no, there was IPRED, which was also a copyright enforcement activity in 2010 that made the Swedish market grow as well. But, so like it could be said, yes, it's growing because of Spotify, which I think is true to a certain extent, but there's also other factors, right? Do you know the exact numbers if you compare, because like I think the Swedish market went downhill somewhere in 1999, 1998, somewhere around that. So compared to that, do you know where you are right now? Because I think that the Swedish market has also lost more than many other European markets in the meantime. So it came out from a deeper hole, and it's now going up at a steeper rate than other markets are. So could you just tell me, I don't know if you have those figures, it's a complicated question, but do you know approximately where the Swedish market is now?
Well, I'm not really, as I said in the beginning, like a music industry insider in that way, but I think I can answer it more or less. If I remember correctly, I think the total music sales around 99, when it was the highest, was something like 1.5 billion Swedish crowns a year, and I think it went down to maybe 700 million or something like that, and I think it's back maybe somewhere over 1 billion again. So I mean, there's still quite a lot to take back, so to speak. Then I don't really can't really compare that with other countries because I don't have that insight. But just to say about the IPRED was a law that was how do you say, it came a new law at almost the same time as the trial against the Pirate Bay guys, where you got new ways of sorry for my English, but basically bigger options for people, for the record companies when trying to find people doing illegal downloads. But I think there's no it doesn't seem like the people have started. It doesn't seem like people download less, even though the IPRED law was at the same time that Spotify came and had its success. Studies show that as many people as before say that they download music illegally in Sweden.
Another question right here.
Right, you've pointed out that Sweden has been a very early adopter in IT technology due to government policies in popularizing home computers and all that. Now, from that, we've seen the development of Spotify and innovative services. My question now is, are you still ahead of the crowd? Is Sweden still kind of a laboratory for new developments in IT? And when, if so, is there any kind of new development that you can see that is happening in Sweden right now that you might, that other countries might adopt or companies might adopt?
I think it's not as big a difference anymore, but I think still, I mean, there's still, as I said, just stuff like average broadbands are much faster than general in Sweden, but and there are a lot of like interesting startups and so on in Sweden, but I can't really like mention one trend that I think that I can see that I think is coming here.
Any other questions? So I think we're going to wrap it up then. Just one more really important announcement for all of you before you leave. There's been a black Berlin Music Week bag somehow lost. Maybe somebody just took it by accident. Maybe if you have one of those like black bags with stuff that doesn't belong to you with you, please hand it down to the information downstairs. We're going to take a short break and then we're going to continue with diversity number 5, Occupy Music, a talk by Andrew Dubber about making a documentary about the music collective Fora do Aisho in Brazil. So please stay here. Thanks for coming to Adam's talk. Thanks to Adam again, and see you later.
Thanks for listening.